Okay everybody, so welcome to this video about doing the brakes on a 2016 Volkswagen Golf. Here I'm just taking off the lug covers, and I bought the car used, so I had to make my own little tool out of a coat hanger just to pull those covers off. And I'm loosening up the lug nuts here with the car on the ground. This is obviously the first step to doing your brakes. You got to get the wheel off, so loosen them, then jack up the car and go ahead and remove the rest of the lug nuts once the car is jacked up. And I would obviously recommend anyone out there in YouTube land to use jack stands. I don't have a jack stand available, so I just don't use it, but what I do is I put the tire underneath the car. That way at least if it falls, it won't completely fall all the way on the ground. And like I said in my other video about the oil change, I mean, when these jacks, if they lose pressure, they usually just kind of bleed slowly, so it's not like a real fast drop typically, which, it's not impossible. But anyway, so now I'm here at the caliper, and these are 13 millimeters, so I don't want to hear anybody complaining about me using a deep impact socket on my ratchet there. But it's just what I had easily available in my garage. I didn't feel like going and getting a shallow socket, and it worked fine. They weren't really seized or anything, so it wasn't like I was putting uneven pressure on them. But yeah, just loosen these 13s and remove those, and then you can get to the caliper. And it actually helps if the caliper is really squeezed on tight. You can kind of take a screwdriver and wedge it in the top, and in that little gap at the top there, just kind of wedge a screwdriver in it and pry it up with a screwdriver. Works really well. But mine came off pretty easily, so I mean, I just kind of rocked them back and forth and pulled it off. And then I secure them with a coat hanger. Again, I use that for quite a bit here in this job. But yeah, I just hang them up, make sure I don't break any of the brake lines or anything, because that's pretty important. You don't want to leave your caliper hanging by your brake lines and end up having to replace the fluid and bleed the lines and all that. Big mess. So there's the calipers out of the way, and just pop off these old pads. I've been through quite a fiasco with my brakes the past couple years, having people work on them, and then I had them go bad, and in the rotors within 6 months. I have no idea what happened. I mean, I had them inspected 3 weeks before, and they told me I was 20%, and then I was into my rotors within 3 weeks. So I'm just going ahead and doing them all at once and replacing them. And there's about 3 millimeters left on my pads, some maybe a little less. But one of my pads was separated from the backing, and it had a big crack across the braking surface of the pad. So I guess it was pretty much time to replace them. But here, after I just popped out the old pads, I'm just taking a wire brush and kind of scrubbing up a little bit in the little insert spots. And my car was actually pretty clean. I mean, you can see a little bit of dust came out of there, but there's really not much buildup, so I didn't spend a ton of time cleaning everything. I mean, I scraped it out with a screwdriver and used a little bit of a wire brush, and I mean, everything just pretty much popped into place pretty easily, and there was no buildup. So here you can see the new pad going in, and I did put a little bit of grease on it to kind of help it slide into place. And once you kind of get the hang of doing this, once you do one or two of them, you kind of see how you can angle them in there. I mean, you just got to make sure each clip is in the slot, and kind of put angle in one side like I'm doing here, and squeeze it, press it in, and kind of squeeze that clip together, and it just pops right into place. Not hard at all. I mean, if you're using really excessive force and everything, something's just not lined up right. Something's catching on the guides or something. So just take a look at it. Maybe you might need to use a screwdriver to kind of push it lightly into place and persuade it into the kind of into the guide and kind of pinch the little clips together a little bit so it slides in. But you shouldn't need to do much more than that. I mean, you could take a little rubber mallet maybe and tap it or something, but I don't think you should, if you're pounding on it or having really hard trouble, you need to just kind of step back, I think, and take a breather and focus, refocus, and look at it and just kind of guide it. Make sure each clip is in the top and bottom where it's supposed to be, and then just kind of angle it in at a diagonal angle, and it should just snap in fairly easily. And that's what I'm doing here. This one just kind of wasn't really wanting to go in, so I took a screwdriver and just kind of pushed it right there on the corner to get that back clip to pinch together and just pop right into place. And you can see, I mean, I didn't have to do too much with it, and you want to just use controlled, deliberate movements and don't go, you got grease on it and stuff. You don't want to go, slip and go flying off and get grease all over your rotors and pad surfaces and bust your knuckles and everything else. So just kind of deliberately and controlled, just kind of push on it a little bit. And here I'm showing, I put a little bit of grease on this piston here on the caliper while it was out, just to kind of help it slide back in place and keep it working properly. I did that right just before I put the caliper spreader in there, and these tools are only $10 to $12, and the handle on mine is loose. If you read the reviews, everybody says the handles break, and they do. Mine lasted like not even through one brake job, and the handle's already slipping on it. And I'm not sure what's underneath it. Some people said there's like a 17 millimeter square bolt head underneath the handle, but I haven't, like, mine slipped, but I haven't been able to pull the whole handle off and look underneath it to see if I could fit like a wrench on it to turn it instead. So if anybody knows about that particular handle, I got it at Advanced Auto Parts, I think, and let me know. I mean, how did you get the handle off? If you just used a cut-off tool and cut it off, or what? Because mine is not, like, it's stripped out, but it's not falling off yet. So I don't know how to get it off. But here, I'm just checking my guide pins, and there's all kinds of grease inside there, and they're smooth and clean, and there's no dirt. So I didn't really bother with these. I greased some of the other ones. I greased the back calipers because I had to, I removed those. I pulled them out because you'll see on the back calipers with the emergency brake, you got to do a lot more work to get the piston retracted, and the caliper just kind of rests right on that little rubber boot. I didn't want to rip the boots. So I pulled those pins out and got the plastic and the pins out of the way while I was retracting that piston, and I did re-grease those. But here I'm just putting the caliper back in place and replacing the bolts that hold it. No big deal. Again, just 13 millimeter. Tighten them up, get them as firm as you can get them. And there, the caliper still has a little bit of play in it, and it's moving freely. So all that looks good. And when you get in your car and start it and pump your brakes at the end, that'll firm up. And so that's done. That's basically the front. You just repeat this on the other side, and obviously the last step is to put the tires back on. And I don't really have much else to say about this, so I'll just let y'all watch here for the rest of this. But I went ahead and showed the process just because it's the last step, and some people might want to see it. I don't know. But that's the front, and we'll be on to the back, and I'll show you how to do the back calipers with the emergency brake. This particular Golf does not have an electronic emergency brake. I mean, I read a lot online. I know some people have these new electronic emergency brakes, and you have to get the Volkswagen computer or diagnostic tool and plug it in and tell the car to retract the cylinder, or you can juice the plug with a battery and some connections and send power to the, unplug the fitting and send some power to the fitting and get the piston to retract that way or whatever. But on this particular Golf, I mean, I don't know if it's the base model or what, but it's not a GTI, and it doesn't have the electronic parking brake. It's got, the hand-operated manual parking brake, but with the back calipers, it still has a special caliper that spins, and it doesn't just push in, so you can't use the caliper tool, but you don't have to have a computer or anything else. So I'll get into that here in a minute and show you what goes on the back as soon as I get this tire back on. Hopefully it can help some people do their brakes. So I do want to mention though that you will need some special tools to do the back brakes, but you don't need to purchase an expensive computer or anything. You're going to need one of those oil filter wrenches, and it's like the perfect tool for this. I mean, it's got a great shape to it, and you need something with a real wide gap. So you'll need an oil filter wrench and some channel locks to spin the back caliper, or excuse me, back piston. So here I'm just finishing up with the tire, and I torque the lugs down as tight as I can get them and lower the jack back down, and we're done with the front, and we'll be on to the back real shortly as soon as I replace these little lug nut covers. So here we are looking at the back rotor and caliper, and there's not enough room to fit that funny setup I was using with the deep 13 on a ratchet. So here I just switched to some ratcheting wrenches, which I did also have in my garage nearby, thankfully. But I just used a 13 ratcheting wrench to get in there. And then my guide pins were spinning around on the back really bad, so you have to hold those. And I actually was having a little bit of a hard time finding a tool to fit in there, but those needle nose vice grips work just great. Those are the only things I could find. It's too thin to fit another ratcheting wrench in there. Like there's hexagonal heads, but it's so thin you can't get a wrench in there in between it. So I was using these needle nose channel locks, and I'm not really sure what else you could use. I mean, you'd have to use some kind of needle nose or a really thin wrench of some kind. But I would take note of that. There is, you might be able to there's a little flange on it that sticks up. You might be able to get some type of wrench on it and just manually kind of hold it and squeeze it, and it might not fit great, but That's worth noting, so be prepared for that, that you can't fit a regular, I mean, you can see those ratcheting wrenches I was using, they're pretty much standard thickness wrenches, and they weren't fitting. But once you get those two bolts off the back, it's just two bolts on, just like the front, on the top and bottom of the caliper, then you can pull the caliper off. And here, this is the oil change wrench, and that's the inside of the caliper with the piston, and you got to kind of work that wrench in there behind it and find a nice solid place to back it up on, and you kind of got to put it to one side and squeeze it in, putting inward pressure on it, and then take your channel locks and being careful not to grab the rubber boot around the piston. Don't tear that boot up. But you can kind of start at the top and just kind of lightly squeeze it and just kind of push down on the piston and get right inside that rubber. But yeah, take your channel locks and turn it clockwise. And so you got to squeeze. Squeeze with your left hand, however you're doing it, but with the oil filter, you got to squeeze and put pressure on that, and then get your channel locks in there, kind of delicately around the rubber boot, and grab that piston and twist it clockwise. And with a little bit of work and a little bit of patience, you can just kind of work that thing right back down inside, and it'll flatten out. So, I mean, again, it gets kind of frustrating, and this is one of those deals where you just kind of got to go, take your time, take a deep breath, and it might slip off and seem like it's moving forever, but once you get it turning, because they're kind of seized a little bit before you start turning it, so, but it might actually help before you put the oil filter wrench on it, just to put a wrench on the piston and kind of get it turning, because once they're turning, it's not bad. But yeah, so get it turning, and then it'll turn. And I don't know why. I mean, they're just designed to where you have to put downward pressure on them, I guess, because I mean, I tried twisting it without squeezing it with the oil filter wrench, and it just doesn't move. But I mean, you'd think if it was threaded that the threads would pick up, but it doesn't. I mean, you have to squeeze it. So I don't know what the inside of them look like, but you have to put pressure on it and turn it at the same time. But yeah, I got that done. The piston is retracted, and then here I'm just showing, I greased my pads where the caliper will be contacting it, and I put a little grease on these guide pins since I did take them out, and they could have gotten dirt on them or something. I don't know. I had them out, so I went ahead and put a little dab of grease on it and then put them back. But again, like I said earlier, I pulled those pins out because you can see how kind of those calipers are heavy, and you can see the sharp lines, sharp edges, and the brake lines and everything are in there. So when I was finagling that wrench around, I didn't want to, those little arms and legs that are sticking up off the caliper were resting right on that rubber boot, and I didn't want to slip and rip that rubber boot off and then end up getting dust and everything in there, so I just went ahead and pulled those pins out. But that's done now, and the pins are greased, and I lined the caliper back up, and I'm just showing here. I mean, it's pretty much a done job at this point. You just got to line up those two 13mm bolts on the top and bottom, get them both lined up, and put them in finger tight, and then once again hold it with your vice grips and tighten those up as tight as you can get them. And that's pretty much it. Tighten those 13mm and then put your wheel back on. I didn't show that on the back. I mean, it's just kind of repetitive. But I do go ahead, this is the passenger side of the back. So I show more on the driver's side again on turning that piston, because I'm sure that's what a lot of people will want to see on this video. I don't really have much else to say. If I can think of anything, I'll chime in, but Here's the other side, and it's the same procedure again. I just kind of showed taking the caliper off, putting this oil filter on and twisting it, and it works. And I put the caliper back together, the same thing, 13 millimeter 2 bolts. And then you'll put your tires back on and you'll be done. So enjoy that and enjoy saving some money on the brake jobs, and you can have confidence and peace of mind knowing that you can check your brakes and get them done cheaply whenever you need to. Okay, guys and girls, I don't really have much else to say. This is just going to be finishing up the video, and I'll let it play out. This is just lining up those bolts and putting them back in. So if you learn anything about changing the brakes on your Volkswagen, please consider maybe liking and definitely subscribing to the channel. And I can do some more videos in the future. Maybe a little mix of everything. I mean, I do quite a few different things, and I just kind of post whatever I feel like on here, but it certainly would be nice to grow my channel. So thanks again for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have anything positive to say. I'm sure there will be people that could probably come up with things that I'm doing wrong or I could do different, but it's always good to hear from people. So have a nice day.